told you we were going to talk about Ellis Robinson, and he got the highly coveted 5-star plus status at On3. What does that mean, Jake Roos?
That means that he is ranked as a 5-star by every major recruiting service out there. So 247, ESPN, and Rivals, as well as On3, all have him in the 5-star ranking. And that's pretty rare area to be in. I think that there are 10 guys, if I'm not mistaken, that are there now with Ellis in that ranking. And, Georgia has 3 of the 10. Nobody else has more than 1. So that's pretty impressive. But Ellis, I was kind of surprised he wasn't there already. The Rivals ranking on him was just a little bit low. He was still their number 1 cornerback, but in their latest update, he climbs up the board. To me, what's really impressive about this, and it's not the case with all of these guys out there, but what's impressive to me about Ellis is that he's the number 1 position. He's the number 1 player at the position across all boards. That shows to me that in what can be a pretty subjective world, that a lot of people are seeing the exact same thing. And that's pretty scary. And I think that that's where you get into some of that rare air. Even with the designation of the 5-star plus, it's not always the case that a guy is number 1 at his position across all 4. The fact that this guy is, I think, really points to his future. It tells you something pretty strong about him, because there's a lot of great, On3, I think our team is the best, but there's great evaluators at all of these sites, man. And I think the fact that they're all seeing the same thing and saying it's a no-brainer, slam dunk, this guy is the number 1 player at his position, it really speaks to the level that Ellis Robinson is playing. And as you said earlier, Ro, seems pretty well prepared to come in and make that jump quickly. Now, he's got a row to hoe with the guys ahead of him. There's no question about that. But he's going to be ready to challenge when he arrives in Athens. No question about it.
Yeah, I like him a lot as a prospect. I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted by this fact that somebody posted this on our board. This I hate to take away from Ellis Robinson. You're awesome, Ellis. This James T. Yoder mouth breather on Twitter is trying to say that had DJ Turner made the tackle on Quentin Johnson on that 3rd and 7, that Michigan wins the national championship. And his reasoning is they would have advanced and they would have beat Georgia because they beat Ohio State more than Georgia did. That they want to. Do they want to cross-reference TCU scores there too? Because
that's how sports works, though. It's only about your team.
I don't know if the TCU cross-reference works. They really need to try and stop people like that on Twitter. I'm cool with the trolls and the Russian bots and things like that, but morons like him and that crazy person, that Sam Block or whatever his name was from Ohio State last year in the playoff. I don't know if y'all saw that cat. I mean, somebody need to put him in a rear naked choke, because he needed a little less oxygen to the brain. He had way too much going. But man, I tell you what, these Big Ten folks are different. That's for sure.
They need their own app.
I get it, man. Hurt feelings.
Ellis Robinson's a stud, though.
Ellis Robinson. Listen, Ellis Robinson ain't going to make it easier to beat Georgia. I can promise you that.
No. A little more difficult. I've said it over and over again. He reminds me of, like, as a prospect coming out, as Vernon Hargraves, and I thought the world of that kid. I thought he was amazing at Florida. It didn't quite turn out as well for him in the NFL as I would have thought it would. I think Ellis is a bigger guy just in general.
What do you think about that J.C. Horn comparison down there?
Yeah, I think that's solid. I was never blown away with J.C. Horn in college. I thought he was a good cornerback, but I could understand why he's drafted so high, because he ran well and his size was projectable. I understood that. But I think Ellis Robinson is a very, very rare talent at cornerback. I think he's one of those guys that he's not quite Tyson Campbell freakish athleticism, but he's kind of in that same, he's kind of in his league, while also kind of having maybe a DeAndre Baker type sensibility of playing the position, which was absolutely elite. I mean, DeAndre was a 5'11", long, ran well, but not super well, but just, had a natural ability to play the cornerback position like few do. And that's why he was so successful. But I think Ellis kind of has a really incredible combination of those two things.
And I think too, what people don't always consider about Ellis, although they should, is whatever you think about IMG Academy, and people have strong opinions on that program, but at the end of the day, IMG Academy is playing some of the best teams in the nation. This kid is getting tested week in and week out during his season. He got tested week in and week out last year. He's getting players. I mean, the guys he's going against in practice are as good as players anywhere in the country. So he's playing really high level competition and really honing his game. And I think that that's something that only speaks further to his ability and what he's going to be able to do at the next level, because he's not going to be unprepared for the level of competition that he's going up against, in my opinion.
And the fact that he's got a 2-syllable first name, it fits right into Simon and Garfunkel's song, and you can just say, "Hey, Ellis Robinson."
I had never thought about that, but we will.
Does the same for Branson's the same way, dude. Roderick is not though. Roderick, you gotta rush it a little bit. It doesn't sound quite as good.
Are we allowed to call Roderick Robinson Hot Rod, or is that Rodrigo's forever?
Yeah, that works.
I like Ramrod, dude. I think we call him Ramrod.
Ramrod.
I mean, that's how he's going to be used. So yeah.
Last thing on Ellis Robinson. There's your guy, Roos.
Yeah, no question, man. Listen, and I've got something coming here soon. I've been trying to get all my thoughts out on this one, but I'm writing a piece. Listen, we were in a different spot 2 months ago, and actually even about 6 weeks ago when I wrote a piece on, Fran Brown and Will Muschamp just must be out smoking cigars. It's a little different now. I mean, the safety situation has changed, and the couple of guys have moved on. They don't necessarily have to take a guy, but the guys that they have, 2 top 100 corners, including I think DeMello Jones is the number 2 corner in the state of Georgia for the class, if I'm not mistaken. Really, really impressive job, man. And I'll tell you this, I have no doubt in saying this. I do not believe Ellis Robinson would be a Georgia commit if Fran Brown were not the cornerbacks coach.
Something about that guy, man. Message board for you, Jake Roos. Does Georgia get LJ McCray and Chris Cole?
I feel a lot better about Chris Cole. I'll say that. I do think that they're still the team to beat for Cole. Tennessee's going to be tough in there too. That'll be an interesting one to watch as it comes closer to decision time. And then you look over at McCray, man, I feel like Georgia's in a really good spot. Everybody I've talked to seems to suggest that that's the case. Simultaneously, though, he is a Florida guy, and the Gators have been really thick in this and were considered the favorite for a long time, if they're not still the favorite. Georgia's probably neck and neck, I would say, and maybe holds a slight edge. But when it's that tight for a guy, I think you always got to wonder about that. So I say yes on Cole, and I'll say I feel good on McCray. But because it's not happening in short order, that leaves a lot of time on the clock, and that may not work to Georgia's advantage. I think that they probably get one of him or Aiden Breland, though, in the end. And that's neither of those is a consolation prize.
All right. And obviously, with Georgia missing out on Williams Nwaneri, the Mizzou NIL topic has gotten a whole new set of eyeballs on it from a lot of Georgia fans and a lot of fans who are kind of learning how this Missouri NIL deal is potentially going to shake things up a little bit in college football recruiting.
Yeah, I think it's a real thing, man. I do think it's giving these kids a lot to think about. You're hearing Ryan Wingo's name circled a lot with Mizzou right now, too, the 5-star receiver from Missouri that Georgia was in on for a long time. They still are, but I don't consider them a favorite or anything like that. But yeah, this law is really interesting, man. I think that it changes a lot, and it gives those Missouri kids a lot to think about. And, for me, what's going to be interesting to see is how does Missouri's season go? And does that affect Eli Drinkwitz's, job status? And if it does shake that up, then what happens to these kids, and what happens with this money, and what happens with these things they're signing, and how does that all work? I don't know. And I feel like if Drinkwitz stays, I don't think you got to worry about it. If he doesn't, if he's asked to leave, then what happens? I think that's a big question. And I'm pretty intrigued to see how it plays out. Because somebody at some point is going to have to fight this battle where they say, you didn't live up to your end of your NIL bargain. That's coming down the pipe. We all know that, I think, that eventually somebody's going to have to set a precedent and do it. Nobody wants to be that team, though. Nobody wants to be the guy to do that. And so I'm just interested to see if they're able to keep everything together ultimately. I don't know. I don't have the answers on that one, man. And I'm as intrigued as anybody to see how it plays out.
I do know this. I think Missouri getting Williams Nwaneri and Wingo is going to have a similar effect. And stick with me here in NIL, that Bear Bryant's trip to Los Angeles to see to visit with Coach McKay way back when had on the sport in that area, and as far as integration goes, because Bear Bryant visited. He knew that USC had way so far superior athletes with African Americans and white people being integrated in that whole in that school. And eventually he came back. He played that game. He wanted to see that Alabama was overmatched. I believe they lost by 21 points. They got just road graded, and that was a kind of a monumental moment for the sport, just in terms of integration in the South. Because Alabama did that very soon after. I mean, I think this is going to have a similar effect on the way NIL is used, because you're absolutely kidding yourself if you don't think every state in the country is not working super hard to get an NIL law very similar to this one.
You better believe all the coach. You better believe every coach in the state is calling these guys and saying, "We got to get this done, man." Look,
Kirby's going to be outside of the Georgia Gold Dome with the picket sign, man. He's going to be 100%.
See, Tomahawk Dog over here in the comments says probably once he starts drawing the check, it's done deal, at least for a season. But who knows? And that's really what. At the end of the day, man, it's like, remember when we used to think that like the national letter of intent was like ironclad, and then that was able to be broken. Once lawyers get involved, man, this gets murky water.
Well, the national letter of intent is still kind of ironclad. You still got to get left out of it. The problem is the national letter of intent is they let guys out of it for the same reason that if this kid really wanted to push, they'd probably still let him out of it.
I agree. That's what I'm saying.
Because nobody has the balls to stick it to these kids.
I agree.
No, I'm not saying they should.
Sure.
But
no, rightfully so, because you're going to listen. The PR you're going to get if you're the team that does that is going to be miserable. It's going to follow you around. Every coach in America is going to point at you. You're gonna. That's an uphill battle if ever there was one. If you're that team.
And to counter the point that I just made, my own point at all is if Williams Nwaneri backs out of this, I mean, he could serve as a dentist right away and snatch every tooth out of that law immediately. All of a sudden it's like, well, I mean, it just doesn't even matter. I mean, all of a sudden kids are using Missouri, in-state kids are using Missouri to make that happen.
Yeah.
But
go to Missouri, hit the portal.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, for kids who know where they want to go, how valuable would a law like that be at Georgia or Alabama or somewhere like that? Like if you're sitting there with a somebody that's committed early, like a Malachi Tolliver, for instance. I'm not saying
Malachi Starks last year.
Yeah, Malachi Starks, right? Yeah, that's a great example. But even Malachi Tolliver, like a local kid, car dealership, come up there, sign. Hey, his kid signed with Georgia. He's going to be up here doing this and that. I mean, shoot, it may make him $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I don't know. Malachi Starks probably could have made $500,000.
Yeah.
That's, just all the different things he could have done around the Athens area. So yeah, you're right. And this is a real interesting thing to see get navigated ultimately.
But, too, the thing about it is to some degree, like, I don't know, man, it's like the idea of if the guy goes there and sucks, can they get their money back out? No, I don't think they can, because we're treading the finest of fine lines of like, this is pay for play.
Well, I think what's going to happen.
If you don't come to Mizzou, we were never going to give you that money anyway. We didn't want to give you that money. You better come perform for Mizzou, or else the money was moot all along. That's where we're the gray, murky territory, man.
Well, Bruce, I don't think anyone's going to take the money back from, Williams if that happens to him.
Probably
I'm not
not
saying it will. I don't think it will.
But
they're gonna withhold it from the next guy.
You're bingo. Exactly.
2025, 2026.
They're not.
Those are the kids that are going to get kicked in the shorts from this because they're going to learn their lesson on it.
Yeah, they're not answering the phone when Missouri calls next time.
Yeah, Taco Bell's going to stop putting the sauces out for everybody to get a hold of. Somebody took all the sauces, and now they're just like, we can't put these things out no more.
Perfect analogy.
You know, like
I'm that guy, dude. I'm that
guy. These dudes are taking our sauces for Taco Tuesday at their own house, and it's screwing some stuff up. He's going to mess it up for everybody.
I got a drawer full of fire sauce right now.
Hey, I will say this about Williams recruitment, right? Because his name just tongue ties me every time. I think it's going to eventually mess up my brain. I also think a big factor in his recruitment is this whole thing like wore his crew down, okay, like down to the nub. And I think ultimately it was a fatigue issue. And I think they're just like, man, we're not cut out for this. We're not cut out for this jet setting all across the country stuff. Let's stay close to home. And it's not super close to home. You've been to the Kansas City area and then tried to get to Columbia. It ain't easy, but it's a lot easier than having to go here and there and everywhere to try and, to try and get to every game. They'll be able to see him a lot more, there in Columbia than they would most places.